average, men are more interested in things and women are more interested in people. And that's actually the biggest difference we know of psychologically between men and women. And even though men and women are quite similar, all things considered, the extremes make a difference. So you imagine that in order to become an engineer, look, obviously not everyone becomes an engineer. You have to have a particular temperamental proclivity to become an engineer. You have to be extraordinarily interested in things rather than people. Well, most of those people are men. And if you want to become a nurse, well, then you have to be much more interested in people than you are in things. And most of those people are women. And so you get differences in occupational choice that are also, by the way, quite great in Scandinavia, especially in the case of engineering and nursing, that are mostly due to biological differences. And you cannot minimize that by social engineering. So, and it's not a bad thing. Like, look, one of the things you want to ask yourself is that what is the purpose of setting up a society that offers maximal equality of opportunity? And one of the answers is that you maximize people's free choice. And if you maximize free choice, then you also maximize differences in choice between people. And so you can't have both of those.
But of course it will have differences in choice, of course, because we are human beings. But I can't see why it differs between me and Skavlan, for instance. But of course it differs in biological things, but not in choices, because I think more how we raise them, how we live, education, sort of culture, attitudes form a human being, whether or not they are a girl or a boy when they grow up. Mm-hmm. And if I raise my daughter to become a leader, to be self-confident, to have a high education, for instance, I think she will have a good platform to become a civil engineer, to become a CEO of a company, or to become a nurse.
Well, that is what people who think that the differences between people who are primarily culturally constructed believe, but it's not what the evidence suggests.
Okay, we don't agree on that.
But violence often pops up in your work as something you think drives things. That I think you've said in relations between men are regulated by a background threat of force, and in a sense that's why men have difficulty with women. Is it really so?
No, that's why men have difficulty with women who are completely out of control. But
who should control women?
Well, other women themselves, men, society, just like everyone is controlled. I mean, you're controlled by society, I'm controlled by society, and thank God for that. I mean,
funny. I mean, you described yourself as a liberal earlier, and I think a liberal doesn't think that a society controls women or men.
Well, let's say regulates. I'm a psychologist as well.
But what is an out-of-control woman? What is this creature? How do we know when we met one?
Well, I'm sure that you've met women in your life that acted towards you in a bullying and detestable manner. It's very difficult for women to cope with that because they don't have any real recourse. And female bullying can be unbelievably vicious. And usually that takes the shape of reputation destruction, innuendo, and gossip. It's well documented. It's very difficult to defend. No, men do it too, but men... No, but
disproportionately women, in your view, or not? Sorry.
Yes, disproportionately women. That's what the data indicate. I mean, if
but
men
where is the data on innuendo and gossip?
Well, it's among antisocial behavior among adolescents. It's a well-documented field. So, because people look at aggressive and antisocial behavior in women and in men. And in women, it tends to take the expression of innuendo, gossip, and reputation destruction. And in men, it tends to take the form of outright physical aggression. There's a whole literature on that. It's not a surprise to anyone. This has been known for 30 years. I mean, the rates of antisocial...
I think the idea of the female gossip probably predates 30 years.
Well, it does.
By a long time, but that doesn't... doesn't make it gospel,
but
really,
people
does it?
No, it doesn't. But people have looked at how women express... Look, women have to express aggression somehow unless you're willing to say that they're not aggressive. They tend not to do it physically, not to the degree men do, so they use other channels. And what other channels are there other than physical aggression if you're going to be aggressive? Well, you go after people verbally. You go after them with innuendo and gossip and reputation destruction. And that's how it works.
And just to be clear, that you think that's predominantly a female modus operandi?
It isn't that I think that.
Well,
it's that the clinical literature indicates that. It isn't that I think it.
Well, I'm not interviewing the clinical literature. I'm interviewing you. What do you think?
Well, I'm a psychologist and a scientist, and I tend to base my opinions on what I've read in the broad, relevant clinical literature. I'm not making this stuff up. I studied antisocial behavior for like 15 years. I'm actually quite an expert.
Well, we actually have a quote of you about your opinion on gay marriage and regarding gay marriage in Australia, and you've said, quote, "I would be against it if it was backed by cultural Marxists because it isn't clear to me whether it will satisfy the ever-increasing demand for an assault on traditional modes of being." But don't you think that opposing gay marriage just because it was it's also in the agenda, as you say, of cultural Marxists is problematic, and it's kind of against your principles as a principally liberal person?
I said if, right? So if you read the quote again, that's what it started with. The fundamental news that's important about what I'm doing isn't the political element. And the people who talk to me don't talk politically. They say they've watched my lectures.
But part
and
of it is that I think for a lot of people the kind of personal does become the political.
Or the political becomes the personal.
Yeah, and I think in terms of
but in this situation, a lot of people are wrong, because primarily what's happening is people are watching my lectures, and as a consequence, their lives are improving dramatically.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I'm sure people are like, have had a huge conversion after, and they're much happier once they've been.
It's not a conversion.
But what I would like to do is kind of almost, I think at the moment the discussion about feminism is very divisive, and sometimes it can sort of be like, okay, men have to lose and women have to gain. Actually, everybody has a lot to gain by greater equality. Now, whether you get the equality of outcome that you want, I think only time will tell. But certainly, equality of opportunity is very important. And actually,
we can agree on that.
a lot of men would benefit from that. So I think a lot of men are having a lot of crises at the moment in terms of mental health, suicide issues, their own sense of identity, because I think some of the stereotypes put on men are quite limiting for them as well. I think they make men quite unhappy as well.
The devil's in the details with regards to equality, because I'm an advocate of equality of opportunity. But
and
I think
outcomes.
the idea outcomes, that's an appalling doctrine.
Why?
All right. Well, hang on.
Because you have to produce an unbelievably potent bureaucracy to make the ever greater and ever finer distinctions that are necessary to enforce equality of outcome. How many group differences are you going to equalize across? Is it just gender and sex? How many genders?
No, so
gender and ethnicity? How many genders?
I think
how many
what
ethnicities?
people are...
How many races?
There's not a secular humanist organization or country on the planet that has ever produced as a good thing, an intentional good thing, rapists and murderers. So,
well, that's highly debatable. That's highly debatable.
Actually,
I mean, one
it's
of the things
absolutely true, because there's never been a secular humanist government on the planet.
I don't know. I think the Soviets were pretty secular.
No,
humanists.